for a very wonderful event to recognize the Premio Iberoamericano, the Bryce Book Award, the LAR University of Florida Best Articles, and we will have, I'm Pavel Schlossberg. I was chaired the award committee for the LAR Best University of Florida Best Article Award, and we're going to present a few remarks by the folks who are on the panels, and also some of the authors are here as well in person. We also have video recordings for some of them. Again, a real highlight for us to be here. And I will do a citation for the best article for LAR, a really great distinction. And we also have an honorable mention. I will also read from the selection committee reasons for selecting those articles from a really robust pool and process. So the article that won the award was by Ana Luisa Moraes Suarez, and the title is Child Separation and the Stolen Generation of Brazil, Indigenous Peoples, Unfreedom in Amazonia, and the article was published last year in Latin American Research Review. I am one of the associate editors for cultural studies as well, and that was one of the contexts. I was part of the selection committee with a wonderful panel. So here's the citation. Through the rigorous archival reconstruction of an 1877 habeas corpus case, the kidnapping of two indigenous sisters, Angela and Benedicta Simoes, from their parents in the upper Rio Negro and their delivery to Manaus orphans judged, Moraes Suarez dissects how the legal discursive apparatus of orphanhood, wardship, tutela, and the patriarchal family ideal converged to dispossess indigenous, Black, and mixed-race families and convert their children into unpaid laborers long after indigenous slavery's formal abolition in 1755. Anchored by deep archival work across 160 wardship petitions from Manaus Legal Archive, 1860 to 1910, and bracketed by Donna Ursula's 20th century life story, the article advances several interventions that distinguish it as a model of Latin Americanist scholarship. It effectively engages with and moves beyond the Afro-Brazilian frame of slavery and abolition studies to integrate indigenous experiences into the analytics of precarious freedom and the afterlife of slavery, refusing the historiographic siloing that often separates African and indigenous trajectories of bondage. Its comparative gesture towards the Australian stolen generations and parallel colonial cases in Belgium, Canada, and India is calibrated with unusual care, drawing the comparison taut where it most illuminates and resisting the temptations to flatten context. The article further distinguishes itself by centering Amazonia and rubber-era Manaus as a generative site for rethinking 19th century citizenship, labor, and racialization by modeling an effective methodological bridge between historical anthropology and archival history, and by reading indigenous acquired invisibility, quote unquote, as a survival strategy that resists both victim-only and heroic resistance narratives. Throughout, the prose is scholarly and accessible in equal measures, marking the article as an exemplary contribution that will reward Latin Americanist specialists and readers from adjacent fields alike. And I think we now also have a video from Ana, who unfortunately couldn't join us in person, but she did share some comments. Thank you. Gracias.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. I am Ana Luisa Soares, speaking directly from Minas Gerais, Brazil. Sorry I couldn't be there in person, but thank you for the opportunity to be talking to you even through a video. So first of all, congratulations to my fellow panelists, Pablo, Abel, and Barbara. It is an honor to be amongst you. And thank you to the panel's chairs as well. I'll be very brief. I won't take a lot of your time because I know that speaking through a video is not as engaging or interesting as speaking there in person and chatting and exchanging ideas. But I really wanted to share a little bit about the article, Child Separation and the Stolen Generation of Brazil, Indigenous Peoples and Freedom in Amazonia. So in this article, I talk about a micro story that I found in a court case at Arquivo do Tribunal de Justiça do Amazonas, so a justice archive located in Manaus, a northern part of Brazil, during my PhD research. And I found this very intriguing court case about the kidnapping of Angela and Benedita, two indigenous girls. Angela was around 9 to 10 years old and Benedita 7 to 8 years old. When they were kidnapped, there was violence and they were taken from their parents in the Upper Rio Negro and brought to Manaus. In Manaus, they were separated. Their guardianship was passed on to two white families in Manaus, and thus they were legally treated as orphans. So this, unfortunately, this kind of child separation, this kidnapping, was not a unique case. What made this case unique was that the family was reunited after 5 months of the kidnapping. The parents used the judicial archive and some political animosities to their benefit and were able to use a justice system that was made to exclude them to have their children back. But it's a lot of facts and interesting things that happened in this court case, and I could be here talking to you about it for hours and hours, but I will try to be very brief. That from this story, I analyzed and discussed macro structures of Brazil in the 19th century. So the kidnapping happened in 1877. And I then analyzed this institution of family and how this concept played out to exclude and to separate and to break up families that did not fit these ideas of Western white patriarchal families. Through this court case, I also discuss citizenship, and more specifically indigenous citizenship in the 19th century. I talk about orphanhood and childhood and child labor, these three categories intersecting gender, race, ethnicity, and class. So very broad ideas. Orphanhood is a strategic concept to analyze the structures of a society, and for Brazil and in the 19th century, that is a very prolific point of analysis to understand, to analyze indigenous history, but also other sorts of history. And in the end, I was really talking about identity and historical erasure of indigenous people as a project of nation. And I insert this discussion into broader discussion throughout the globe about child separation, child circulation. There was a very profitable endeavor. But most of all, I insert Brazil and this part of history into a broader discussion of the stolen generation. So the stolen generation is a very well-known case of indigenous history, especially in Australia and also North America. It was United States and Canada. But in Brazil, in Latin America, this history is still broadly invisibilized and marginalized in the historiography. So my main point with this article was to give visibility to this indigenous history as a stolen generation as well. So it is not a specific case study. It is how the structure of the nation worked and how the marginalization engine worked in Brazil in the 19th century, and which had afterlives through this day. So as I mentioned before, this was part of my PhD research that I defended at the University of Illinois in Chicago. And I'm really thankful to Vanderbilt University, where I did my postdoc, and when I really worked on shaping this chapter of my dissertation into and transforming it into an article. And for that, I had the close support of Jane Landers and Celso Castillo. Without them, I don't think this piece would be as good as it is. And they really motivated me to see the potential of this article into connecting to these broader discussions already happening in the historiography. So I'm very grateful to them. So I'm open to discussing this further, and emailed me if you want to ask questions or talk or exchange ideas. And thank you again for the opportunity to be sending this video to you all, and I hope you guys have a great Congress this year at LASA.
Gracias. Mi nombre es Moisés Arce, soy profesor de la Universidad de Tulane. Estuve a cargo del Premio Iberoamericano Book Award. Y antes que empezar, quiero agradecer a los miembros del comité, Mark Haley de la Universidad de Connecticut, David Parker de Queen's University, Isabella Coase de CONICET UBA y Karina Anzolavere de la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México. Brevemente, recibimos como 33 libros, ¿no? Y seguimos el mismo procedimiento de 2 rondas de evaluaciones y llegamos a un consenso. Y en el consenso, el premio ganador se llama Historia Mínima del Rock en América Latina, de Abel Gilbert y Pablo Alabarces. Y a menos que me equivoque, la editorial es Prometeo y el Colegio de México. Entonces quiero brevemente leer un resumen de lo que preparó el comité en cuanto al libro. Dice, Historia Mínima del Rock en América Latina excede la promesa del título. Es mejor entendido como una historia interpretativa de Latinoamérica a partir del rock. El libro tiene como problemática central la paradoja que el rock era una música imperialista importada de países de habla inglesa, pero simultáneamente una expresión contracultural de juventud, inconformismo y rebeldía. Reprimida como amenaza a la nacionalidad y la moral en Cuba revolucionaria, elemento esencial de la banda sonora de insurgencia cultural frente a la dictadura brasilera, el rock y la izquierda latinoamericana se coqueteaban, pero siempre con fricciones enormes. Gilbert y Albarces exploran estas fricciones en capítulos sobre Cuba, México, Brasil, Chile, Argentina, Uruguay y los países andinos, contando en prosa cristalina historias complejas de hibridismo, antropofagia e invención creativísima en busca de un rock verdaderamente latinoamericano. Lectores animados por nostalgia por la música de los Shackers, los Jaivas, los Blobs, Almendra, El Polen, Arcoíris y otros más, tampoco se defraudarán, pero el libro ofrece mucho más que eso. Gracias. Y también quisiera mencionar que hubieron otros 2 libros que recibieron una mención honorífica. Uno es Motines y Traición en el Río de la Plata. El autor es Lorey El Jaber, y el otro libro es en portugués, y mis disculpas, Gemiani y sus filos. Los autores son Antonio Alexandre Isidio Cardoso y María Elena Pereira Tolero Machado. Gracias.
Gracias, Moisés. Gracias a todos y a todas por estar aquí. Qué lindo lo que dijeron del libro, me encantó. Muchísimas gracias. Obviamente en estas situaciones el primer agradecimiento es a esas 5 personas que creyeron que ese libro valía la pena ser premiado. Hay 2 o 3 cuestiones al respecto, pero primero que nada, además de agradecerles al jurado, tengo que mencionar la ausencia de mi compañero y colega y coescritor Abel Silver, que no podía venir, estaba loco de trabajo, y aunque queríamos venir los dos, y ayer le mandé las fotos de la ceremonia y lamentó profundamente no haber estado, y yo lamenté profundamente no haber estado con él. Ya llevamos 2 libros escritos y él insiste en escribir el tercero. Yo todavía me resisto un poco, pero ya tenemos tema y todo. Dicho esto, la idea no fue nuestra, la idea fue de Pablo Yankelevich, el director de la colección Historias Mínimas del Colegio de México, que nos propuso escribir una historia mínima del rock en América Latina. Se llama mínima porque la colección se llama mínima, pero sabemos que es imposible hacer una historia mínima de 60 años de rock en América Latina, es absolutamente imposible. Pero esa propuesta fue muy, muy provocativa, muy seductora, y que 2 años después haya 5 colegas que hayan decidido que el libro había logrado su objetivo es realmente muy, muy, muy gratificante. Y también quiero mencionar que también fue muy grato encontrar que la mención era para la colega Lorelei El Jaber, que es una colega y amiga también de la Universidad de Buenos Aires, y no tengo más remedio, estoy obligado a decir que en los tiempos en los cuales estamos viviendo en las universidades latinoamericanas, pero muy en particular en la Universidad Argentina, decir que esto es grato o satisfactorio es quedarse inmensamente corto, ¿sí? Esto me puso al borde de las lágrimas. Estamos en un momento en el cual nuestros salarios están restringidos, no tenemos más financiamiento, nos combaten por las redes y nos acusan de inútiles, y sostienen que la universidad nos paga por hacer tonterías tales como escribir historias del rock, por ejemplo, ¿no? Entonces, en ese sentido, que una organización a la cual pertenezco hace muchísimos años, como LASA, y que sea el espacio de como dijo ayer su presidente, este gran espacio de intercambio y creatividad de los estudios latinoamericanos. Vuelvo a insistir, no me alcanzan los adjetivos para contar mi agradecimiento y mi emoción. Creemos que el libro tiene, sí, varios hallazgos. Creo que es muy difícil, y los que están aquí saben de qué estoy hablando, es muy difícil hablar sobre América Latina como un conjunto, ¿no es cierto? Porque, una razón pragmática, y es difícil documentarse, ¿no? Nuestras bibliotecas son locales, y entonces para poder documentarse, estando en la Argentina, documentarse sobre México, depende de los amigos o de poder ir a Berlín o a Texas, o a Harvard, a Princeton. Un libro básico sobre el rock uruguayo del que tuvimos que prescindir, lo encontré el día siguiente que llegué a Princeton, por ejemplo, ¿no? Y esto todo lo sabemos. Entonces, es difícil escribir sobre América Latina porque es difícil documentarse, y otro porque busca las continuidades y encuentra las divergencias, y entonces producir tejidos que nos permitan interpretaciones de toda la región es bastante difícil. Creo que fue más idea de Abel, que había 2 hipótesis que nos permitían hacer ese tejido. Una era la hipótesis de la modernización, Y la hipótesis de la modernización en realidad también estaba enlazada con que nuestro libro anterior había sido sobre Palito Ortega. Y Palito Ortega fue un cantante muy popular, inmensamente popular en la Argentina y en América Latina en los años 60, 70, en el contexto de esto, la modernización de las sociedades latinoamericanas y de sus culturas a través de la incorporación masiva de la cultura de masas norteamericana y entre ellas la música popular y entre ellas el rock. Entonces sabíamos que eso había existido y dijimos, bueno, a ver, si eso es una hipótesis, ¿qué pasa si tomamos el rock como una de las claves de esa modernización? Es decir, que en vez de hacer historias desarrollistas sobre la política, la economía, etcétera, la hacíamos estrictamente sobre la música, ¿no? A ver, ¿qué pasaba con la modernización musical que desembocaba en lo que de muchas maneras fue llamado rock en el continente? Y junto a eso, la contracultura, porque aparecía claro que había un primer momento puramente epigonal, el que mejor imitaba a Elvis Presley era el mejor rockero, y hay un momento en el cual los rocks se autonomizan y buscan su lengua, buscan su expresión y buscan especialmente convertirse en contracultura. Entonces, una hipótesis era esa, cómo el rock forma parte de un complejo proceso de modernización que desemboca en una contracultura que también tiene relaciones epigonales con el mundo anglo, aunque más británico que norteamericano en ese segundo momento. Y la segunda hipótesis era que habíamos descubierto, nuevamente Abel era el gran especialista en esto, lo que habíamos descubierto era la profunda oposición de la revolución socialista cubana al rock. Entonces, si sabíamos por nuestro conocimiento de las historias que las relaciones del rock latinoamericano con las izquierdas habían sido difíciles, la pregunta era ¿por qué? Y descubrimos que en el origen estaba que Fidel Castro no soportaba el rock. Sí, y aquí surge la posibilidad del contrafactum. ¿Qué hubiera pasado si a Fidel Castro le gustaban los Beatles? ¿No? Y en cambio lo que ocurrió fue que Fidel Castro, 20 años después, puso una estatua de John Lennon en La Habana y le fue a pedir perdón, poco más o menos. No es chiste. Pero eso no ocurrió, digamos. Por el contrario, la revolución condenó muy duramente al rock, acusándolo de falto de ideología y de invasión imperialista norteamericana. Entonces, bien, sobre esas dos hipótesis es que encaramos el trabajo y obviamente no lo voy a contar todo, porque además eso implicaría que ustedes no compren el libro, aunque por lo que veo en algunas caras varios ya lo conocen y lo leyeron. Quiero decir, había ciertos momentos excepcionales en los que esa relación con la política se volvía especialmente densa, más allá de los mitos. Por ejemplo, el rock argentino estaba convencido de su carácter resistente y en realidad no había habido gran resistencia contra la dictadura, pero en cambio el caso de la intersección entre el rock chileno y la nueva canción chilena era un momento muy explosivo, un momento en el que las tensiones seguían y la izquierda chilena acusaba de drogadictos y homosexuales a los rockeros, pero a pesar de eso hay una figura clave que es Víctor Jara, que entiende que hay algo que está pasando con el rock. Víctor Jara produce la mejor metáfora que encontramos en la historia del rock de América Latina, que es que si nos invaden hay que invadir la invasión. Es una frase perfecta, ¿no? Es el único tipo en toda América Latina, procediendo de campos no específicamente de la contracultura rockera, que ve eso con claridad. Hay que invadir la invasión. Y por otro lado, el caso brasileño, en el que un rock, en el sentido más clásico de la palabra, recién lo vamos a encontrar en los 80, porque en el medio lo que hacen es esa explosión modernizadora que combina la aparición de la bossa nova y la combinación con el jazz y el tropicalismo, y uno dice, ¿y a esto le puedo llamar rock? Y sí, era la contracultura, lo que pasa es que era una contracultura brasileña, es decir, antropofágica. Y no en balde, Caetano Veloso y Gilberto Gil terminan presos, Chico Buarque termina exiliado, en fin, sufren los embates de la represión como no había ocurrido en la Argentina o en Uruguay, etcétera, etcétera. Y el cierre es que hay un momento en el que se puede hablar de un rock latinoamericano, que lo que pasa es que creo que ahí hay mucho más para explorar. Coinciden la aparición de un rock latinoamericano con la aparición de un pop latinoamericano. El primero lo inventa Santa Olalla desde Los Ángeles y México, el otro lo inventa Emilio Estefan desde Cuba. ¿No es cierto? Y entonces simultáneamente se producen esos dos fenómenos. Por supuesto, uno tiene su playlist preferida entre ambos, ¿no es cierto? La figura de Santolaya combinando, por ejemplo, el hecho de que en el sur la intersección más fuerte que el rock produce con las músicas populares locales, entre comillas, son las andinas. En México, en cambio, la combinación es mucho más rica, mucho más compleja, porque combina el Caribe, el corrido, etcétera, etcétera, el bolero, etcétera, etcétera. Y Santa Olalla es el tipo que permite unir ambos mundos, digamos, ¿no es cierto? El tipo que toca el charango y también conoce los ritmos tropicales. Dicho esto, comprobamos que en México a Santa Olalla no le tienen tanto cariño y entonces no conviene hablar muy bien de Santa Olalla en México delante, especialmente. El libro dice en un momento, Santa Olalla inventa el sonido de Maldita Vecindad. El baterista de Maldita Vecindad, Paredes Pacho, es doctor en historia y se enojó mucho con esa frase. Así que les conviene no repetirla. Bien. Pero eso es lo que tratamos de contar, eso es lo que quería compartir con ustedes y vuelvo a insistir en el agradecimiento inmenso, Moisés, inmenso, inmenso. Realmente, para mí esto es, es un momento muy, muy fuerte de mi carrera, de mi trabajo y entonces, como le dije ayer al presidente de la ASA, estoy a punto de ponerme a llorar y a rajarme en los brazos. Gracias.
Hi, I'm Wendy Hunter from the University of Texas. I'm here to award the Bryce Woods Prize to Sanctuary Everywhere, written by author Barbara Andrea Sostaita. I would like to congratulate her and say that there was widespread support. I'm here to give it because my co-chair, who is Brett Gustafson, is at a college graduation of his son. However, we have another committee member here, Desmond Arias. So there was widespread support for this book. Coming from Texas, it had special meaning to me because many of the issues she talks about are happening just several hundred miles south of me. So let me read what the committee had to say about this book. Sanctuary Everywhere is an ethnographic portrait of the myriad enactments of care that have characterized past and present efforts to support migrants in the U.S.-Mexico borderland. Through deep and careful ethnographic research in the Sonoran Desert and beyond, the author reimagines the concept of sanctuary as a fugitive practice that surfaces in diverse and unexpected ways. What are some examples of those ways? Small and improvised, often improvised acts as varied as offering medicines to those waiting to cross the border, erecting crosses in the desert where migrants have died alone, and carrying out rituals to the many dead. All these are considered enactments of sanctuary. In this way, Sostaita reframes and illuminates the migrant experience as one of agency and action, whereby migrants in movement transgress the mundane or profound order of the world with its laws, its borders, its rules, and its boundaries that are part of the international system. We are inspired to reimagine sanctuary not as a destination, but as a sacred practice, a fugitive crossing of worlds, a relentless activity. Like migrants, sanctuary refuses containment, refuses to be settled, and always returns in new forms. It is everywhere. So timely and evocative, Sanctuary Everywhere crosses disciplines as well as borders in true Latin Americanist and in true Lhasa fashion. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Wendy, for your beautiful words. And thank you, Brett and Desmond and the entire committee. My first LASA was my first year as a PhD student in Lima, in Peru. And ever since then, this has been such a space of support and interdisciplinary collaboration. And as someone who was born in Buenos Aires and came to the US when I was 7 years old, I've always imagined myself as someone in between Latin America and the Argentinian and Latino diaspora in the US. So it means a lot to receive recognition from LASA and an affirmation of the ways that this project and my work more broadly seeks to cross those boundaries. So I'm very grateful. My book, Sanctuary Everywhere, employs what I call a meander methodology. This is inspired by my friend, Nicole Antebi, who made meander maps of the way the Rio Bravo constantly shapeshifted and forced the US and Mexico to redraw the international boundary. And so the river moved in ways that refused boundedness, that refused nation states. And so my methodology seeks to replicate that. And in today's brief remarks, I want to do the same. So I'll propose 4 meanders or 4 moves for today's conversation. So meander number 1. Álvaro Enciso, my collaborator, is wearing a light green, long sleeve, button-down shirt and cream-colored work pants. His face is sheltered from the sun by a wide-brimmed hat, and he moves leisurely across Tucson Mountain Park's sandy washes. Álvaro travels to the desert every Tuesday morning with a team of volunteers, and together they plant crosses and host ceremonies for migrants who died attempting the militarized border crossing. A volunteer that morning compliments Álvaro on his outfit, and the artist explains that he found the work pants in the $5 discount bin at Costco. Nadie los quería, he tells me. The desert is more lush and verdant than I've seen it before, and volunteers tell me the overgrowth is a gift from the monsoon season. It was the wettest in 100 years. When we reach the site where Estela Bacama Gonzalez, a 21-year-old, was found fully fleshed in June 2022, Álvaro digs his shovel into the chalky earth to make a hole for the teal cross. Each volunteer waits their turn to contribute to the ritual. Peter stands with a bag of concrete to pour into the hole. David collects rocks meant to hold the rock in place. I pour a gallon of water to mix with the concrete. Each of us is silent, somber. Moments after we bless the cross, Álvaro and I look for shelter underneath the hood of his dark red SUV. He tells me he spent a month in Colombia last summer, the country he left as a teenager in the 1960s. The entire time he was there, he felt out of place. I don't belong here. I don't belong there. I'm always the outsider. There is a long pause before Peter intervenes, telling Álvaro, maybe you belong in the desert. Meander number 2. Jim Corbett was known as the Quaker Coyote, and the sanctuary movement colloquially became known in the 1980s as the New Underground Railroad. As John Fife, one of the leaders of that movement in the 80s, told me, sanctuary was a mobile strategy from the beginning. The New Underground Railroad did not begin in the US, but rather started in Central America and extended across Mexico, a fugitive and clandestine network of safe houses, groups of mothers of the disappeared in El Salvador, unions, churches, and other organizations that fed, sheltered, and facilitated the escape routes of Central America. John Fife told me, groups in Mexico, El Salvador, and Guatemala were doing this long before we called it sanctuary. We were late to the dance. The new Underground Railroad took inspiration from resistance to the Fugitive Slave Acts in the 19th century and from efforts to defend young people evading the Vietnam War in the 20th. Many sanctuary activists referred to their work as evasion services, having realized that because of the Reagan administration's partnerships with regimes in Central America, seeking asylum was an impossibility, with virtually all Salvadorians and Guatemalans being denied asylum. Jim Corbett, the Quaker Coyote, realized the limits of the legal approach, and he wrote in a sermon, quote, "Just as the refugees are outlawed, hunted down, and imprisoned, if we choose to serve them, we will also be outlawed." Despite their argument that their work was civil initiative instead of civil disobedience, and that it was the government breaking international refugee law, specifically the Refugee Act of 1980 and other agreements, the work of sanctuary activists in the 1980s show us that this tradition is one of evasion, escape, and fugitivity. Their work points to the possibilities of insurgency and rebellion. As Wendy was saying, in the book, I talk about sanctuary as a constant and ongoing refusal of the present order, of the profane, an antagonism that is at odds with policy and with policing. Vignette number 3, or meander number 3. Without me prompting her, Dora Luz Rodriguez tells me that sanctuary is a sacred practice. She tells me that Casa de la Esperanza, the migrant shelter she co-founded in Sásabe, Sonora, is a sanctuary. Dora is uniquely familiar with this tradition. 1 year after she and her companions were found on the brink of death in Organ Pipe Cactus National Monument in 1980, Dora began to attend sanctuary meetings, which she tells me were taking place at night in the dark, muy calladito, muy clandestino. She tells me that in the 1980s, she and her participants wouldn't even turn on any lights and would only light a few candles because what we were planning was revolutionary. I became involved with the movement because I saw that they wanted to help my people, Salvadorians. At first, Dora attended these meetings as an observer. But when she learned about the movement's evasion services and how they were smuggling Central Americans out of their home countries, she knew she was meant to play a larger role. Eventually, the sanctuary movement helped smuggle her aunts and nieces out of El Salvador through the mountains of Agua Prieta into the United States. And then, from 1985 to 1986, she sheltered a Guatemalan family, turning her home into a sanctuary. Dora now works with Salva Visión, an organization that helps Salvadorians not only once they arrive to the US, but after they are deported, when they are in detention, and even when they are struggling to stay in El Salvador, when they are struggling to not become migrants. Dora accompanies those who have been deported, incarcerated, and struggling to stay in their homelands. She describes her work as offering care to the forgotten, abandoned, humiliated, those whose dreams were stolen, the ones who were turned away, not only by this country, but by others, that is, en route to the US. And in my last little moment, I want to think about sanctuary in this moment, in the US particularly, because that's where my work is located, but throughout the hemisphere and throughout the migrant route, because sanctuary, as I see it, is not only a policy, an ordinance, a petition you sign, but rather a practice that we enact by refusing the everyday, the world of laws and policy and policing, And in the United States at this moment, sanctuary is being increasingly criminalized. Sanctuary cities are being threatened with defunding. Those of us who live in Chicago and other cities that are sanctuaries have seen this administration occupy our cities with federal agents, militarize our everydays, launch intensive operations to remove our city of migrants. And sanctuary must become reimagined, not as a fixed place, but as an abolitionist strategy that sees how immigrant detention is connected with mass incarceration, with the prison industrial complex, and think about the ways that we can exceed the limits of the sanctuary city, the limits of the sanctuary school, the policy, and instead practice sanctuary in our everyday lives. And just lastly, in closing, I want to again thank the committee, and I really want to especially thank my colleagues at the University of Illinois Chicago, including Xochitl Vada, who is here and who has been such a supportive colleague and soon to be chair of our department, my friend Ale, and my husband Alex. Thank you.
I also just wanted to quickly mention the honorable citation for the LAR award, and thank you for the wonderful presentation. So this is a little bit of a bookend or footnote, but I did want to mention this. It was the article La accidentada gestión de sonidos auténticos, agendas intelectuales, desafíos institucionales y conexiones transnacionales en el archivo musical folclórico de Perú, 1949-1952, with the authors Rodrigo Chocano, Juan Carlos Lacerna, and Pedro Roel. Thank you.
¿Preguntas? Vámonos.